That's what they told me to expect, at least a year.
All right, thank you very much. Welcome to the August 7th meeting of the Thurston County Planning Commission. The Thurston County Planning Commission is a resident advisory committee to the Board of County Commissioners on land use planning matters such as the comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance amendments. Planning Commission actions are in the form of recommendations to the county commissioners, the final decision makers. All Planning Commission meetings are open to the public, and community members are welcome to observe all Planning Commission briefings and work sessions. Public comment is allowed for those topics for which a public hearing has not been held. My name is Derek Day and I reside in District 1, and we'll go ahead and continue our introductions here in the boardroom.
I'm Eric Casino. I serve at large and I live in the Lacey UGA.
Kevin Pestinger, District 5.
Barry Halverson, District 2.
Will Hanson, serving District 3.
Scott Nelson, District 4.
Sandy Kaiser, I live in District 3.
All right. And next up, I would entertain a motion for the approval of the agenda.
Chair, can I make a recommendation to make an adjustment to the agenda?
Yes, you may.
Sorry, it needs to be seconded first.
Oh, I'll second.
Okay.
There you go.
I sent in an email to Tasha and Ashley about just taking a quick look at the LRA letter that we've put together, Sandy and myself to send to the commissioners prior to us having a meeting with them now that it's been delayed until the 20th, I believe it is, 21st. So if everybody's had an opportunity to look at that, or if not, just a really brief discussion to make sure that everybody feels that we're on track with that, and that we could go ahead and submit that by the end of this week with the packet, so the commissioners have a chance to review it before the work session.
Okay, do we want to add that as an additional agenda item, or do we want to cover it in good of the order?
I had recommended we cover it during the good of the order.
Okay. I have a note, and then I would like to make a proposed change. If we could move staff updates to before new business, so that some folks can go home.
I second that.
All right. Okay, all in favor of the agenda as amended?
Aye.
Right, that passes. Next, if folks have had a chance to take a look at them, I would entertain a motion to accept the meeting minutes and the audio as the official meeting. July 17th.
So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that motion passes. And with that, we will move on to public communications. And we're gonna go ahead and start here in the boardroom. We've got the all right, we can go ahead and start here with Mr. Pettit. And you'll have 3 minutes. And you're gonna be good, Tasha, for the timer? Okay. All right, and I think you know the drill, Mr. Pettit.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is John Pettit. I live in East Olympia, and I work in a particular fashion of consulting for various clientele for issues related with planning or zoning or such. In this case, I'm doing some work for Mr. Fine, and I happen to be very agreeable with his positions. The property that I'm referring to is one you're going to be looking at tonight, considering Martin Way rezone on it. And there was a couple of issues, a newspaper article that came out, big concern. We don't like bad information. And the real fact is what the real issue is just whether we're gonna correct an error that was basically created 20 years ago plus, 26 years, 28 years ago, which was to zone the property. And they said, well, you cut down all the trees, like, well, a lot of people don't realize, but as we all get older, this was the property in 1984. There wasn't all that many trees on the property at that time. It may appear that there was a lot of trees, and that was a debated issue I had with the planning department here. And so for clarification, there was a couple things I saw on the plan program coming up. I think she's making corrections, Leah, is the property itself does have and is served and has been served, although not right this moment, this parcel, with both sewer and water. Has an 8-inch sewer line out in front of it, which is a very large adequate means to serve any type of use that might be assigned within the zoning that's being recommended. Now, one of the things which I wanted to also point out, because it's a topic of discussion, is the parcel that we're talking about, the property. This is a picture of it as it was divided 1975. It was not by any other means other than it was divided through a short plat system approved with the county. The amazing part about this property though is, how did it get marked into a split zoning? Well, I would suggest that because the section line runs across this one line, it appeared as if it was two parcels. It's only been one parcel during any of this time that there was consideration. And if you just draw a line across it and say, I'll make that low density zoning, you know, for a neighborhood to the south, well, there would be confusion. Well, I think the important part here is to identify that we're seeking to make a correction on that. This opportunity would provide more housing, more commercial opportunity for the county to make more money. And since recommend that if there are questions that please feel free to ask. I'm sure there's latitude for you to ask me questions about information on the property.
Thank you, Mr. Pettit.
Gold medal.
I know.
It's like the Oscars.
Why it be that way. So,
The Academy Award button.
All right, and since you bought me a little time, I'm gonna go through some of the general speaking guidelines. If we can introduce ourselves, we've got one more person in the boardroom, including your address and where you reside in the county. Please address the planning commission, not the audience and the staff. The planning commission may not respond to public comments. And you are of course limited to 3 minutes. You cannot donate your speaking time to another. Please no comments that are lewd, offensive, inflammatory, hateful, defamatory, or discriminatory in nature. And please no comments that are commercial in nature. And all materials provided to the county may be subject to release pursuant to the Public Records Act. And remarks on projects that have already had a public hearing are not permitted. And next up, we have Mike Brewer.
Hello, my name is Mike Brewer. I'm here on behalf of Bar Holdings. I'm the applicant for a project that involves a UGA swap. And I know that the project will be forthcoming in front of your committee in due time through the public process. First, I wanted to thank you for all of your time and effort you put in to serve on this committee. It's a very important role for our community, and it brings great oversight from constituents to participate in the public governmental process. So I really respect that you have taken the time and investing your time to participate in the process and serve constituents such as myself. And I think it brings good process to the hardworking public officials also. So thank you for your service there. In terms of UGA swaps or other policies, I know there's going to be a lot of forthcoming consideration of different policies during the review process. And so we just ask, I know there's been project-specific comments, and so we just hope that you as a committee will hold judgment and welcome us as a willing participant in consideration when projects are distinctly in front of you or specifically in front of you. So anyway, thanks again for your service and participation, and we'll look forward to presenting to you soon.
Thank you, Mr. Brewer. So I stole the sign-in sheet, I think, before some people arrived. Are there others who'd like to provide comment? Okay, you can go ahead. And go ahead, since I'll have you fill it out later if you want, but go ahead and state of course, your name, where you reside for the record.
Thank you. So my name is Rhonda Larson Kramer, and I live at 1814 East Side Street in Olympia, near Watershed Park. And I also have property out right next to Mike Brewer. I have a master's in urban planning and a BA in African American studies. And in law school, I took a course in critical race theory. And I say this only to give you my background because it's relevant to my comments. Burke Consulting gave a presentation for the Thurston County Planning Commission on June 26th. And the presenter stated that the Growth Management Act requires the county to put a lot of housing for low-income people in rural areas to reverse exclusionary zoning, causing inequity and racial disparities. The characterization of income and racial divides between rural and urban Thurston County as being the result of exclusionary zoning is I think a misunderstanding, and I just wanted to, that's all I'm here to do to clarify today. Exclusionary zoning is the use of zoning ordinances that exclude certain types of land uses from a given community, or I should say, with the intention of excluding certain types of land uses from a given community, especially to regulate racial and economic diversity. The Growth Management Act seeks to concentrate all communities in urban areas, whether rich or poor, Black or white, to prevent urban sprawl. Rural land is expensive, and therefore rural landowners in Thurston County are mostly white and wealthy, but this is not the product of exclusionary zoning. This is the result, it's not a result of any efforts to regulate economic or racial diversity. Moreover, putting low-income housing in rural areas does not create a more equitable housing scenario. Instead, it burdens low-income residents because it increases their transportation costs and the cost of accessing services, which I've talked about in the past. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Good evening, you true American patriots. My name is Aiden Espino. I'm with South Puget Sound Habitat for Humanity, giving just kind of our general feedback on the housing element and land use element drafted suggestions. Really appreciate the thoughtfulness, and hence why I started the way I started, the thoughtfulness on this and really trying to balance state requirements with local community needs. I know it's a difficult thing to do, and that staff have been working very hard. I just would say very generally on a high level, we are very happy to see a lot of the changes and feel it is moving that in the right direction to being very inclusive of a variety of housing types and low income and income brackets. We think that is the right step forward, and obviously it's going to be, like I mentioned, a balance between how to implement that based on community needs and, on the rural areas. I think, we'll submit written public comment for folk to read more in detail, but what I'd like to highlight here is just a couple concerns that we had is that we didn't really see much on the way of alternative permitting processes goals or expedited permitting or alternative compliance or design use, like we've sort of had conversations and discussions about, and you've been very grateful on the reception that the commission has had to that. First drafts are always the first go of it, and there are many to be had. But we definitely encourage the commission to look and think about how to incorporate that in the housing and land use elements. Frankly, the way we kind of see it is there's been a long-standing historical or I should say it like this, there's been a legacy of systematically preventing low-income housing development. So we feel like that would fit right in line with House Bill 1220's goals of planning and reversing racially disparate impacts in housing policy by including sort of at least the beginnings of a policy framework of creating alternative pathways for affordable housing construction, reducing barriers there. There was one, I'm trying to remember what, I think it was within, I got even thought, I'll send you a letter. But it removed some specific incentive, identifying incentives from the comprehensive plan, and then said that it moved it into the new goal 4, which was supposed to be in response of House Bill 1220, and it kind of made that more a larger policy framework. I think we understand the aim of this, but like I mentioned, I think it probably behooves us not to define less what to do to reduce barriers to housing construction, or make it more big. So with that.
And are you involved in the Habitat for Humanity housing project in Yelm?
In Yelm?
Yes.
I mean, by working with the organization, yeah.
Okay, were you involved with a Yelm City Council or the Yelm building?
I'm not involved specifically with that project, but I'm aware generally of its progress.
Okay.
If there's a specific question, or we can maybe.
No, I just wondered how you found that process working with the city of Yelm and basically the engineer, the city engineer on putting that project together.
Yeah, I don't think we've had more particular problems or help in the city. I know you said I can't pass my time, but my colleague, I think, has a bit more knowledge of Yelm and experience with that project, if that's okay.
We're still open for public comment, I believe.
Yes,
So,
I'd love to hear from him. Yeah.
Jonathan Thomas, South Puget Sound Habitat for Humanity, 818 East Side Street, Northeast. I would just echo basically everything Aiden said. The updates look really good, and really happy with it. Some things we think could be adjusted in there to benefit our community as a whole, but we probably are pretty happy about that. But I'm willing to answer any question you have about Yelm.
Well, I was just wondering if you found any difficulties working with the city of Yelm on that project.
No, Yelm's been very receptive and appreciated. Joe's a supporter and advocate of ours, the council, the city as a whole is very supportive behind that. So
Okay, and did you find their process for permitting expedited as a result?
Yeah, I mean, comparatively to the other cities, because they're smaller, yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. But they helped us get it through and everything going well there. Infrastructure's done. I don't know, are you in Yelm?
Yes.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean.
I drive by it almost every day.
Yeah. It's going along, and we're trying to get it up as fast as we can. so.
Okay, great. Just want to thank you for your effort in that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, is that it for the boardroom? Anybody else like to provide comment? All right, for those of you online, I think some of you already have, but go ahead and raise your hand if you'd like to provide comment. And Tasha will promote you to a panelist. You can start with the rec.
Hello, I am Loretta Sepinen. I live on Orange Street in Olympia, Washington. And I want to comment on our housing discussion today. And I am concerned that our consultants are referencing a need to increase housing in the rural area and suggesting that that's coming from our community. And what I read when I look at the comments is a whole lot of people who want to be careful about how much increase we have in housing in rural Thurston County, and instead want to have us focus on maintaining the value of working lands and the value of undeveloped land. in the rural area while we address the need for housing, especially affordable housing for low-income families. And so instead of some of the topics we've got on tonight's agenda, I think I want to suggest two topics related to serving low-income people currently living in the rural area and also people that in the future who may live in this area. And the first one is to strengthen our policies related to maintaining existing rural lower income housing for lower income rural people. And we do that by having strong policies that could keep the manufactured homes we've got and other policies that maintain naturally occurring low-income homes. And I just think we need some beefing up of those policies. And then the second issue is low-income housing. And I'd like to see groups like Habitat for Humanity do what they're doing in Yelm, but also in Tenino and Rainier, even smaller districts, because that's where we have the sewer and water. And that's going to make it more affordable to build the housing, low-income housing that we need, that will serve low-income people, not necessarily be in the rural part of the county, but serve low-income people. And so I think that Thurston County needs to think about some new ideas, new partnerships between those cities that have very few staff to work on this issue, but where we're actually, because it's serving people who work in the rural area and are low income, that the county puts resources into helping those small cities provide more rural low-income housing in the rural cities. Thank you.
Commissioner Bartlett? Yeah, I was just, could you clarify what you mean by naturally occurring low-income housing?
It's a term used by these housing specialists.
Okay.
It means the kind of home I lived in as a kid.
Okay.
So where we didn't have a septic system and where the house really wasn't well maintained. And it's because of being a low-income family, and wasn't until I left for college that the family got an indoor bathroom and that sort of thing. So those kind of things occur all over the place because people can't afford to maintain, put in another $100,000 to keep the house up to modern standards, you know.
Okay.
That's naturally occurring, and it fortunately does provide homes for low-income people.
Thank you. We'll move on to Betsy Norton.
My name is Betsy Norton. I live in Olympia, and I just want to make a couple of brief comments. One of them is that when we're talking about affordable housing, I hope that people are also looking at vacancy rates as well as physical structures, because what I'm seeing, you know, there are two parts to affordable housing. One of them is whether it's there. The other one is whether people can afford to get into it. The second thing is in terms of the rural, in terms of housing in the rural areas, I'm sort of working on a little proposal to think about zoning, not in terms of single family units, but instead to think about them in terms of an environmental footprint. It's with the idea that developers, if they are skilled and properly incentivized, can create multifamily housing that has the same environmental footprint as a single family place, and it will make it much more affordable. Right now, I priced out a recent development, one house that went in a place near the Beaver Creek rezone. And by my calculations, the the land is probably, was $300,000. Building the home, which is a $5,000 square foot home, was over $1 million. So when we're talking about the problem of affordability of people coming into residency in the county, we're limiting that at this point because of the zoning. It's limited to multimillionaires. So this is the problem that I think we're facing. I think the legacy of people who've already lived here in the county, in the rural county, they may have various incomes, but people coming into the county to buy a house or to build a house, you have to have very significant money. It's not even middle income, it's way above that. So somehow that challenge needs to be addressed. And I think that the environmental constraints need to be, regulations need to be very close, very strongly enforced. And they, particularly regarding water efficiency, energy use, and wastewater and stormwater treatment, those building requirements need to be strengthened. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that may be it for public comment. All right. Oh, one more.
David.
Okay.
Hey, good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. David Toyer with Toyer Strategic Advisors, 3705 Colby Avenue, Suite 1, Everett, Washington. I work as a consultant on behalf of Bar Holdings and other projects in Thurston County, but the Bar Holdings project that Mr. Brewer spoke about a few minutes ago is the one I want to speak about this evening. I know that the commission has had some discussion based on some citizen comments about UGA swaps and what Thurston County may do with them relative to this particular comprehensive plan update. Just wanted to cover some brief history on them. The first UGA swap piece of legislation adopted by our legislature was in 2022, and it allowed swaps to take place at the periodic updates, which is every 10 years. They have since amended that similar statute this last legislative session that also added a provision that swaps can be evaluated on an annual basis. Really, the genesis behind the notion of UGA swaps is that urban growth boundaries were, established, 3 decades ago, and we now have a significant housing crisis in our state, in our counties, in our regions, and that we also have areas in UGAs that have not been utilized for a number of different reasons due to critical areas constraints or other cost issues with being able to actually provide any urban services, including water and sewer, to those locations. And really what the legislature has done with this swap legislation is it's encouraging jurisdictions and individuals to take a look at whether or not there are opportunities to take land that currently sits inside the UGA out of the UGA and exchange it for land that is currently outside the UGA to bring it into the UGA because it is more ready for urban development. It does not have the same constraints, challenges, and cost implications as the property that is being pulled out of the UGA. And we just ask that as you look at elements like the housing element tonight, you continue discussions on the land use element and everything else, that as those comments come in, you withhold some judgment on the specific nature of UGA swaps until you have the opportunity for this proposal to come before you, and you can look at the merits of that proposal relative to the statutory criteria. So thank you for your time this evening. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much. All right. And with that, I believe we have no more public comment. All right. With that, We're gonna go ahead and move on to staff updates.
You probably can't read it, but there's been a change in staffing again. We like musical chairs, but I want to hand off the community planning manager role
Hey.
to Andy.
So beautiful.
I'll give you a little bit of background about why I'm handing this off. I won't be walking out the door. Won't make it that dramatic. And then I would love Andy to share a little bit about himself. For those of you who have not had the pleasure of working with Andy over the last 2 years. As some of you may have heard, Joshua Cummings, the current, or was the Director of Community Planning and Economic Development for the last 6 or 7 years. He was just appointed as the new Assistant County Manager for Thurston County. With Robin retiring, they thought it best to actually do succession planning and get him caught up to speed. So we're all very excited about that. With him serving in that new role, I have been asked to be the Interim Director of Community Planning and Economic Development, which means Andy gets to be the Interim Community Planning Manager. Would you like to share anything about yourself?
Sure. I think most of you know me. There's a few folks I don't really know yet, and I'm looking forward to getting to know you. Andy DeFobis. I'm now the interim community planning manager. I've lived in Olympia for almost 20 years. I've been an employee here at Thurston County for over 14 years. So been through a lot of things here. I first came on board with the critical areas update back in 2010. And since then oversaw, I was the face of the pocket gopher listing back in 2013, 2014. So I've had my share of some pretty controversial topics and still here, ready to go for more. Shoreline Master Program was part of that. And I've led our conservation programs as well in community planning. So Conservation Futures, Open Space Tax Program, Habitat Conservation Plan implementation. Those are all things that have been in my wheelhouse. And over the course of my career, I've also done some current planning as well. So have hopefully well-rounded experience that I can bring, but I'm really excited for this opportunity. I'm excited to re-engage with the work that you all are doing. It's been a minute since I've been a part of these meetings. And I'm also looking forward to still having all the folks who are moving up as part of the team. I think we're really well positioned with this transition to keep doing great stuff.
Andy holds the record of the most planning commission sessions on a topic. What is it?
Oh, well, Shoreline Master Program, yeah, it was 81 work sessions and a public hearing. Yeah. I think I was only here for about 60 of those.
Only 60. Oh
Only
boy.
60, yeah.
So he definitely has had experience working with the planning commission and working very well and collaboratively with the planning commission and the board. And we're gonna go through this transition very slow. I hope that's okay with you all. The comp plan's a big lift. There's already a lot of things on Andy's plate that he's gonna be shifting. So I'll probably be lead staff as long as comp plan's on the agenda for the next few months. And then as Andy gets caught up to speed and as Maya transitions back to more full-time and the West Coast, we hear, and we'll be able to attend night meetings again. You'll see her face as well. Yeah. So anyway, I don't necessarily, this is kind of last minute that I asked Andy to stay. And so if it's okay, I'm also gonna ask him to leave and go, go enjoy a summer evening before he has to spend all future work sessions with the planning commission.
I do have one question. Fine, sure.
Oh, go ahead.
Is someone going to take over the SMP role with ecology and the rest of it up to the board? Or are you gonna maintain that?
I'm gonna be overseeing a lot of that still. I have the discretion as to what I'm gonna hold on to and what I'm gonna delegate. It just depends on, workload and all those sorts of things. But I see myself still being very heavily involved just because I've been doing it for 5 years.
Yeah, it's a very difficult issue, so.
And I don't really want to let it go, even though it might be good for me.
I know you may not have the answer to this yet, but how long-term is this particular interim swap? Like, is this, are you taking over temporarily? Or are you intending to to move on, or do you not know yet?
I hope that it becomes permanent, but I don't get to make that decision, the
course.
board does. And I don't know how quickly they'll make that decision.
Do you-
But good question.
Do you know if these positions, these changes that are now in terms, are these going to be posted internally or externally? Or do you have any idea on that, from everything from CPED director to planning manager to assistant county manager? Are those? No.
Yeah, so assistant county manager, that one is permanent.
That one's already.
Yeah, the director roles get appointed by the board, so they can make that decision. All the other roles, we really strive to go externally, you know, and make it as open and transparent as possible. So there'll be a few probably coming up at different levels. But we're back to being short-staffed. We were gonna be fully staffed and not anymore.
I guess that gets back to gets to my next question on there, which is that since there's gonna be a lot of, you're gonna be overseeing a lot while you're figuring out how to delegate. Is there anything that we need to be sort of adjusting in our own schedule to help accommodate the staffing issue?
Think we're in pretty good shape. The comp plan, full transparency, we're looking at shifting schedules on that, not because of the transition, but because of, you know, I think all of us underestimated the amount of time it takes to produce brand new chapters of your comp plan and go through a collaborative process, both between us and the consultant team, who've been great, and then us and the public and the planning commission. So I think we're trying to build more breathing room into the schedule, but it's not a delay related to the transition.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Yes, congratulations.
Did they give you the bump of pay too?
Not to talk to HR, but temporary pay increases are typically a part of.
Increase their popsicle rations.
We'll be monitoring that carefully.
Thank you for letting us bump this up.
Appreciate it.
And thank you and welcome back. And
Yeah,
congratulations.
appreciate it. All right. Enjoy your meeting. That's one of those wheels. There we go.
All right, and with that, we can go ahead and move on to work session number 1. We've got a ways to go to break that record. Martin Way, land use and rezone amendment.
Good evening, commissioners. Welcome. Thank you for being here tonight and all your time that you put into this commission. It's good to see you again. I will share my screen. I have a PowerPoint presentation. So today I'm going to introduce the Martin Way Land Use Amendment and Rezone Proposal. I think you've heard about it from Mr. Pettit for the last few weeks, but this is staff's take on that. I've got a bunch of stuff on my screen I need to close. So today's work session, we're going to review the proposal and the policies that affect or inform that proposal, and we'll discuss the next steps. So the background is that the county commissioners made this priority number 7 out of 10 on the current official comprehensive plan docket. In this case, it's a property owner initiated request, and he requested to amend the land use and rezone of a 7.1 acres of an 8.17 acre parcel. That parcel is in the Lacey urban growth area, so it is informed by the Lacey joint plan. The parcel has split zoning. Here's a proximity map of where the parcel is. You can see it highlighted in red and a star there. It's on the south side of Martin Way, just a little east of Winco. So now you kind of have an idea of where that is. Those people who do the grocery shopping anyway. This is a 2022 aerial photo of the site. Up on the Martin Way end is, I think it's trailer sales. And then the back end has been used for storing extra trailers with the business operation up front. Yes,
Later on, it's mentioned that there were violations and one of those is vehicle storage and resolved. You mentioned trailer storage and other stuff. Can you tell us what the vehicle storage violation was?
I will get
And
to
how
that.
it's resolved? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So it says on this slide that the current use is trailer storage, but this is a recent photograph of the site and you can see that the trailers have been removed, so it's resolved in that way. There are no structures on the site. The zoning is low density residential on the south portion of the site, and along Martin Way, it is the mixed use high density corridor, so it's a different land use. As Mr. Pettit stated in his comments, there are utilities to the site. Apparently in the past there have been, and there's a sewer line running up in front of the site, which is odd for a UGA site, I think, because those would be City of Lacey services. The violations that exist on the site, the vehicle storage is resolved. But there was some tree cutting on this 7.1 acre parcel to the south and a lot of heavy grading and filling that were done. And those are still open compliance cases. This is the zoning of what the parcel looks like currently. That panhandle up there against Martin Way is the mixed use high density corridor. The south portion, the 7.1 acres, is low density residential. And you can see that to the east and the west is more low density residential. And that area to the south with the peach coloring, that is medium density residential. So if the applicant's proposal is approved by the Board of County Commissioners, that entire area will be become mixed use high density corridor.
Sorry.
Yes.
Go back on this, back to that slide 6. I just want to make sure I'm very clear because there was talk about the differences. You're saying that there is water and sewer or only one or neither?
I don't have firsthand experience with that, but I thought there were no utilities to the site. And then Mr. Pettit brought a map in that said that there's a sewer along the street, along Martin Way in front. And he says it has been serviced by both water and sewer in the past.
I don't know how it couldn't be. I mean, there's obviously a operational business up front and the chances that that's on a well and septic are about 0. So I would imagine that that infrastructure coming in on Martin Way would service the whole parcel, just like everything behind it.
Well, there were, prior to 2020 or 2021, there were 3 residences in the trees down on that south portion. And they were removed, and I believe they were on septic systems, but I am not certain about that. But I'm almost certain sewer did not serve those 3 residences.
Yeah.
But maybe the business up front.
Yeah, and I would imagine that any redevelopment of this parcel would have to be, because it is in the UGA, serviced by these city services that come down Martin Way, and
Yeah.
it just makes sense too. So if we're trading a few old septic systems out back and putting them on sewer, that seems like a win to me.
Yeah. I suppose it would depend on what the proposal is and if there is.
I guess we're not looking at a development
We're not
proposal at
looking
this
at
point
one.
anyway.
That's
We're just
true.
Looking at a zoning
That's true.
proposal.
Can you also say any more about the heavy grading and fill in? That's an open issue.
That is a compliance issue. I've read the notes in the online compliance database. And there are photos of heavy grading and fill. I don't know the details of quantity because it was unpermitted. And so there was no application filled out that demonstrated how much fill or how much grading would be done.
So the owner would have to rectify that before anything would move forward.
Yeah. So this, the grading, fill part and the tree aspects are completely separate from the zoning. And so if it were to be rezoned and time came where they wanted to redevelop and that was still ongoing, that would have to be resolved with that redevelopment.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah. And those violations would follow the property.
Now, this is one property, or it was one property with 2 different zones.
That's correct.
The 1 acre plus in the front was zoned differently than the 7 acres in the back.
That's correct.
but we don't know why it was done that way.
Well, I think that it's pretty common. We had a case last year with split zoning of, well, someone on the planning commission called it aspirational. I thought that was pretty good, but just the corridor itself to be high density, mixed use high density, and then beyond that corridor was low density residential. I don't think it was an accident. I think it was just the way it was done. There's no telling.
Are any other parcels along that high density corridor split zoning?
I haven't done
go ahead and
any research on that.
That would be a question that I would have.
Okay.
Related to that, on slide 7, you see this map that's pretty close in and it just shows the neighboring properties and it shows that differentiated band of mixed high density commercial along the corridor and then separate low density in yellow beyond that. Do you know if that kind of continues that in that style across the entire corridor?
Yes, it does. Absolutely, because it's all low density residential once you get off of the corridor.
So this is a pretty radical change then to that.
But when I say the entire corridor, I want to be clear that the corridor actually runs from downtown Olympia to East Lacey. We're talking about the UGA area.
Yeah,
And
that's
it's
what I'm
a mile or two of that corridor, and it does look like this, yeah.
In UGA.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Bartlett, you
I did. I'm just really struck by what looks like the visual difference, at least between the pictures that Mr. Pettit showed us of the property historically and then the way it looks now, which is this difference of the grading and the tree removal probably. I obviously, as you said, this is going to be, those violations are issues for any future development, but I know that a lot of it, so it's untied in that way, but a lot of our consideration for rezoning would be like, what kind of, you know, community or ecological services was this property functioning as before? And so to preemptively kind of remove those does make the case easier to do the rezoning, but I am wary of incentivizing that. I guess my question is I guess a matter of time. I wasn't sure what the pictures that we saw of the relatively intact habitat or whatever it had been, the space before had been, and then this new look to it. Do you know how recent that regrading and tree cutting is?
I believe it happened in 2021.
Okay.
When I looked through the aerial photos in 2020, it looked to be heavily forested with 3 dwellings. And then in 2022 was the next aerial photo that I have, and that it was clear.
And how soon, when did this process start to get submitted towards us, towards the county for rezoning?
It was received this past docket application period.
Yeah.
Sometimes these things take
It's
a
my
while. so I'm
understanding that
check.
this process was started as part of a compliance agreement and the county wanted the landowner to apply for this rezone.
It's kind of tied if they wanted to continue the business on that site. That was a critical step for that business to continue to operate on the property because
Even though they had a hearing examiner say that they could continue with that use
On
in
the south,
perpetuity.
on the south.
on the south portion
Yeah,
because it is low density residential.
It was permitted to have the trailer sales up there on the corridor on that acre. But when they started encroaching into the low density residential, that's where the violation came in.
So the hearing examiner,
There
didn't
hasn't been a
say-
hearing examiner.
well, I know that they had.
Oh, okay.
I know that they had a hearing examiner take a look at this 20-some years ago.
Oh, I see what you're
And
saying.
at that time, the hearing examiner said that this could be used for auto sales.
Yes.
And it didn't make a distinction between the top acre versus the lower 7 acres. It just said you could use this parcel for auto sales. Is my understanding of how.
Well, I think that you can use that portion of the zoning. If it's not allowed in the low density
That
residential,
would have
then
been before the zoning was ever initiated because it was pre-GMA.
We'd have to look into that.
yeah, I
more.
don't know that.
Okay.
That wasn't part of the application package,
Okay.
and so.
I guess when I'm looking at the zoning, like on the south side, we see this medium zoning. So we go from this higher zoning to lower zoning. And then we have this medium zoning along the south side of the property where there's a bunch of duplexes. And then directly to the east, we have a mobile home park.
Mm-hmm.
That's even though it says it's low density zoning, mobile home parks are kind of more than low density zonings. And I know to that southeast corner in Tanglewild is the brand new apartment complexes there. So it seems like this is not really surrounded by low density. This feels like it's already a pretty dense area and becoming more and more so.
And I know that some of Leah's next slides get into really the intention behind these zones and the vision that Lacey and the county, at least is baked into the Martin Way corridor study, has for this area. So it might be helpful, especially for folks who don't travel this part of Martin Way, to have Leah go through those different pieces.
I think some of the questions will be answered through the slides.
Okay.
So this
Just
is,
raise more questions.
yeah, that's true too. So this is what it would look like if the land use amendment and rezone were approved. So this, because, yes.
Just a quick question. So with that rezoning, is the owner then able to use the land the way he or she is using it now?
That is not a guarantee. I am not the permitting planner on it. I will let you know in the coming slides what the intent of the mixed use high density corridor are and what the intent for the low density planning, the zoning designation is. So you'll understand what the intent is and infer what you think a planner might do, but not reviewing the project or the application. I can't say what the outcome of that might be. Is that clear? Okay. So because this parcel is in the Lacey urban growth area, the Lacey joint plan does inform what happens on these parcels. As some of you remember, we did update and adopt the Lacey joint plan last year. So with this project, we worked closely with the city of Lacey to kind of talk about what the options are. The other study that informs this parcel is the Martin Way Corridor Study. It was published in 2022, and there were 3 jurisdictions that had seats at the table for a steering committee on that plan. It was spearheaded by Thurston Regional Planning Council, and you can find the entire plan at trpc.org if you want to read it. And it's kind of a way to envision a different future for the Martin Way Corridor. So the 3 jurisdictions were the city of Lacey, the city of Olympia, Thurston County, and then Intercity Transit also was at the table to talk about what the future looks like for Martin Way Corridor. So to address how the Lacey Joint Plan informs this parcel, in Chapter 2, the Urban Design and Land Use chapter, there is a goal that addresses this, and it's stated, achieve a mix of uses along designated arterial corridors that are walkable and transit oriented. And then there are 2 policies that support that goal. Apply different mixes of commercial and high density residential land uses along the Martin Way corridor based upon sensitivity to existing uses so they may be integrated into the long-term vision. The other policy is to maintain the health and vitality of existing businesses along the Martin Way corridor by accommodating the continued operation of existing auto-dependent uses, even though they don't meet the intent of that zoning district. So the Martin Way Corridor Study, they think they created a vision, but the fact is that this vision has been part of the development code for the Lacey UGA and the city of Lacey for about 30 years. So the vision hasn't changed, but I sat on that steering committee for over 3 years, so I am pretty familiar with the Martin Way Corridor Study. So the vision is the Martin Way Corridor is an attractive, mixed-use, high-density, residential and commercial area where people enjoy walking, shopping, working, and living. So as this is a different map that's in the packet you got. I thought it was a little clearer. One of the ways that the steering committee thought that vision might be more easily achieved was to create development nodes. So we selected 2 primary development nodes and 2 secondary development nodes. You can see the primary are at Carpenter and then the triangle at Pacific and Martin Way over in the city of Olympia. The secondary nodes are at Lily Road and Martin Way, and then Ranger Hensley and Martin Way. And our parcel that we're talking about tonight is over here to the east of that secondary node at Ranger and Hensley. So it's not actually within the node, it's a little bit to the east of that node. But the idea was to get these nodes developing, and that might spur more development activity of the kind that is desired along the remainder of the corridor. Yes?
Oh, I was just going to point out that there's bus service there every half hour.
Yes.
So this is very much within a major transit corridor.
Yeah.
If we're looking at creating low income dense housing in that area.
Exactly. And it also the approach from the transportation departments that were part of this, there were planners and transportation planners as part of the steering committee, was to make Martin Way safer for pedestrians, safer for bicycles, and to increase to increase transit accessibility. So that's the vision, if you want to dive into that plan, trpc.org. Mr. Pestinger?
Just confirming, looking between these two maps, one we have, is it that Olympia is in dark gray, Lacey is in medium gray, and the urban growth area is in a light gray? Or it's that kind of carved out thing in the bottom right?
Yes.
That's the UGA, right?
Yes.
So there's a huge section all along there that's not.
Yeah, I'm ready to go, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And with that, have we had any more conversations with the city about how they really need to start annexing this stuff? I mean,
We're going through a Lacey annexation ILA at the moment, not for this section. But, and they're working on an annexation study. So to their credit, they have hired a consultant to do an annexation study, and they've been working closely with the county. And it's actually Burke. Different people at Burke, but so yeah, when we know more, they just started, but when we know more, I think that would be a really good topic to share with.
I would imagine that if we start doing things like increasing density, and making it so there is more development potential there, that the likelihood that the city would want to annex it would probably go up as well, because they sure love getting stuff after we've done all the work.
I mean, yes, I also think that you brought up a good point earlier about the services that are provided here, and that it's unusual that the city might be providing these services in an area that would otherwise be unincorporated. So if they're already, if the sewage at least is connected in that one chunk of it, it does make sense to, in the case for annexation, that they're already getting plugged into this. They might as well have some say in it.
Yeah, the sewer goes all the way down Martin Way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and same with water.
So Commissioner Kaiser, this gets to your question, zoning district comparison. So the low density residential zoning, the intent of that is to allow a broad range of housing types and guide development to create a buffer between incompatible uses, which to me, this doesn't do with the mixed use high density and the low density housing, but the density allowance in a low density neighborhood is only 6 houses per acre. That's a maximum density. So if those 7 acres were left as low density, that would provide an opportunity for 35 potential housing units. The types of residential uses are single family, cottage, planned residential development, townhouses, and group homes. And no commercial uses are permitted in that low density residential. In the mixed use high density corridor, the intent is to gradually change from an area dominated by strip malls and go to mixed use high density residential and commercial where people enjoy walking, shopping, working, and living. So really mixed use. The density here is dramatically different. There's a minimum of 12 units per acre and a maximum of 20, with a total potential of 162, and that's for all 8.17 acres. Any type of residential housing is allowed as long as it meets the minimum and does not exceed the maximum. And then a variety of commercial uses are allowed in that. Things, retail uses, financial planning, things like that, banks, general services.
Is the residential minimum still applied if they're being used for the commercial purposes as well? Like, would that require a 5 or 1/5 or whatever?
Could you ask that again?
Yeah, so if someone's using this for the retail, financial, or general services use, this piece of property, would they still be required to have a minimum of 12 residential units?
Yes, it would be mixed use and you'd have to meet the minimum as well as having the commercial uses in there.
Great, thank you very much.
Mhm. So because it is in the UGA, we have coordinated with the city of Lacey on this project. In late July, this project was introduced to the Lacey Planning Commission. Tonight, we're introducing it to the Thurston County Planning Commission. After the city of Lacey receives more comments, hopefully from this meeting here, they will make a recommendation. And then we would like to schedule in the future public hearing with the Planning Commission on this topic. There is a motion that's been passed around in case we get to that point, Henry.
Why, I mean, I think it's good that we've talked to our municipal partners on this kind of thing, but why would the process be running through their planning commission instead of just talking to their long-range planners and seeing how they feel about it?
So traditionally, remember those joint planning commission
Yeah.
meetings? We're trying to make this run a little bit more efficiently. And so their planning commission meeting and then providing feedback and then us. So this is in lieu of a joint planning commission meeting. It's not essentially, because it's a joint plan update.
Okay, so are we expecting that all future joint plan updates or anything that happens in the UGA is gonna go through both planning commissions?
They typically do.
They
Yeah.
did, the joint planning, the
Okay.
joint plans did go through both planning.
And
the
not
question
a
of
lot
whether-
has happened out of cycle either.
It's just a question of whether or not we're all sitting at the same table.
And the other reason we wanted to do it because your schedules are quite extensive this year and it would be an off week. So it'd be planning commission 3 weeks in a row. So.
But if you
we wanted to
really
spare
do
that.
want to have a special joint meeting, we could ask Lacey. But last time we really worried about the quorum and whether they'd even make it. So this is really staff trying to find a creative solution so that you all don't need to have a bunch of extra meetings.
We do at least have it when it's dark and cold out in the evening, please.
And also this coordination may, it may give them a different perspective on annexation, you know, oh, if we do this, maybe it's worth it, you know?
I could only hope.
We're trying to be good planning partners with the city of
That's
Lacey,
fair.
yeah.
Mr. Halverson.
So as I understand it, just to reiterate and get my brain straight on this. Current zoning is the front portion, the 1 acres is mixed use, high density corridor.
Yes,
And the back portion in yellow is the low density parcel,
that's correct,
even though it's the same parcel.
yes.
And the recommendation for the land use amendment and rezone is to make it all high use, mixed high use?
There's not a recommendation, that's the proposal from the landowner.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, okay,
That's the proposal from the land.
yeah,
Yeah. The proposal from the landowner is a mixed use, high density corridor for the entire 7 or 8.
yes, that's correct,
8 acres.
that's correct.
Okay.
I apologize if I've been moving too quickly.
No, we haven't.
Okay.
I just verifying.
With this time frame, if we do, since we can only do comp plan updates once a year, are we expecting that we will still be able to get this through for the adoption in December of comp plan? So it would be, we'd have this docket item cleared off our plate this year?
It's possible, but it's quite possible we might not make it. Ultimately, if we do complete the process this year, it will just be folded into next year's update if we don't happen to get that done. It wouldn't come back again to the planning commission. It
I
would just
understand that part. I just,
There is a path if things happen as quickly as possible. That it could still be done this year, like be part of that package.
Even if we wait till October before we have.
I mean, it
It's
gets harder.
close, but September is unfortunately very busy with content with with the comp plan, and so it would result in longer meetings.
I mean, this one seems like, because I think we first heard about this one in November of this last year when we were doing Lacey joint plan. So it feels like, even if this is our first work session on it, feels like this has been kind of a topic that we've been aware of for a bit, and I'm sure that the city's been aware of it for a bit. And if bureaucracy pushes this off another year, I would like to have more than one thing done off our docket this year. I mean, 2023, we got a lot of stuff done. 2024, we got bigger projects for sure, but we're really not knocking things off our docket. So if we could.
There are things, they're carryovers from last year.
Yeah.
It's gonna still be a pretty big package. It's
Mhm.
gonna be the UGA amendments and the LTA zoning update.
Yeah, right.
Yes, on the development code side. I was thinking about that one,
Oh, okay.
one opportunity at the end.
Yeah, I guess from my standpoint, I'm looking.
Point of order.
Yeah.
Because people multiple times.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. My two questions, I guess, here are, one, have we heard from any of those people who are living adjacent to the property yet in terms of the public comment?
We haven't received any public comments.
Okay, cool.
But we also haven't noticed yet. We
Yeah, that's
haven't
true.
Scheduled
I
a
guess
public hearing.
this seemed like it was probably pretty high profile of an issue for the folks who are living around it, so I wasn't sure if we'd.
Yeah, when we set the
public.
public hearing, then we send notices to those people.
Great, and then if we do set this as, rather than an independent public hearing, if we were trying to jam this into one of our meetings, what is the timeframe we're probably expecting to push this through? And to follow up with what Commissioner Pacino was saying about wanting to get things done faster. Because if it's gonna be like, oh, we have a motion, we need to make that motion, we can push that on, and if, assuming that there's not a giant litigation about it, then that's one thing, but if it's like we have to do a bunch of work sessions, then it might not be possible.
That's up to you. So once the public hearing is held, you can actually make a recommendation the same night. There is a certain amount of time we need to do all of the noticing and due process ahead of that public hearing. Which is basically about 3 to 4 weeks. And then, but after that, you can make a recommendation that night, like hold a work session following the hearing. But you may also say, hey, we heard a lot during public comments and we want staff to follow up on a few items and come back to the next meeting.
Yeah,
You're not obligated one way or the other.
For me, a lot of this kind of lives or dies on what the people who are living in the immediate area are concerned about. And so I am very in favor of whatever gets us to hear from them in a reasonable timeline.
So I was just gonna say one additional option. So obviously on the sheet that I handed out, it was the 2nd. We could attempt to do the 18th, but it will be a full meeting, a very full meeting. So if the planning commission wants to try that avenue, just keep in mind, it might be a longer meeting.
Yeah, I might be in the minority of that, but I know that Commissioner Pestinger is not big on long meetings.
Been clear?
I think what might be a little bit of a compromise there would be, we could start requesting public comment for that meeting. Kind of spread it out over the other two, over them. That might get it through faster. If people know that it's on the docket, if people know that this is a place to come to start talking about it, they could come to that meeting, we could start the discussions then, and that'll give us a little bit of a framework to go into that next meeting a little bit better educated, maybe get through it faster.
So logistically, the way that would happen is that you would schedule it for a particular date and we would just agree to notice it earlier.
Right, exactly what I'm suggesting.
Which even September 18th, you have 2 meetings in between now and that folks would have received a notice. But if you want additional time, like what we did with LRA, we made sure to do that push out earlier.
I'm concerned about public feedback, but I'm not concerned that it's going to be as big of an issue as the LRA one. I think that we're probably. Sorry, my last bit of, I had it all stored up. Is if there aren't any objections, I do move to set a public hearing for October 2nd. 2024 on comprehensive plan docket item number TPA 23 Martin Way Land Use Amendment and Rezone.
October 2nd or September 18th?
I propose October 2nd, but that we start notifications early. I think that gives us the combination, unless we want to do it the other way.
Well, I'm just, no, I look at it as we still have 2 meetings before their September 18th public hearing.
That's true.
And they can notice it this next week and it would get out in the paper. So you'd still have plenty of time for them to do that.
I accept your friendly amendment.
Yeah, I appreciate more discussion before we move to amend or move to this.
Yeah, I don't think it's been seconded.
So, yeah.
So we need a second and then we discuss.
Oh, I meant discussion before we get to this, but okay.
Oh, I mean.
Yeah, I would move to amend the public hearing to the 18th of September.
I think we're a little bit out of order.
Sorry.
We're close enough. We don't have a second yet, do we?
I would second the October 18th meeting with early notification for comprehensive plan docket item number CPA 23 Martin Way Land Use Amendments and Rezone, and welcome any.
September
more
18th?
discussion.
September 18th or
September
October
18th.
September 18th.
Okay. All right, it's been moved and seconded, and now we can discuss it. Commissioner Passenger, did you have?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. First off, on public comment, you mentioned that Lacey is working to get more public input.
Well, they want to hear what the public input is. I don't know what steps they're taking. Do you know, Andrew? Are they doing any outreach?
They're gonna have a formal public hearing, and so what our plan is to more or less.
Any notification, are they?
No.
They don't have to.
Well, we're gonna provide our comments as a foundation, as well as with our staff report. We will be writing it up in the same format that we do for the Board of County Commissioners, where there's options for them to consider, and they'll have our staff report to inform their decision.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Do we want to address the motion or?
Yeah, unfortunately.
So, and then we could come back. I mean, it doesn't mean we have to be done with the topic.
We'll have to withdraw the motion temporarily while we do discussion.
Move to table the motion.
Okay, can we pick it up later in the meeting if we table it?
Yeah.
Okay,
To a date certain today.
okay, be good.
So this is really the last slide. Ways to engage. And the easiest way is to go to thurstonplanning.org, and that from there you get directed to the community planning page. And from there you look for the Martin Way, you look for plans and codes, and you select that and you can find a list of these projects. And this is the Martin Way Land Use Amendment and Rezone. You can look at the comments that are on that page. You can make a comment yourself through SurveyMonkey. So this is one of the most important slides. And that's everything. So we could field questions.
I think we have someone who's got some.
So looking at slide 5 and slide 4. You could display them again, that would
Okay.
be helpful. I mean, I share many fellow commissioners' thoughts on this, including both in favor of this for good reasons. And concerns about this, I think, for good reasons. I think that there are, if you look at slide 4. You look at that map and it's pretty clearly distinguished when we talk about that commercial corridor and high density development, and then the low density corridor immediately beyond that. And low density is not exactly nothing. I mean, we're not talking rural density of 1 per 5 acres. We're talking, 49 units could be on this 6-acre parcel.
Well,
7
actually
acre.
35 on the 7-acre parcel.
Okay, it says 49.
Yeah, I amended the slide
Okay.
today.
So still 35 is not nothing in that 7 acres. And it is more in matching with looking at looking at that corridor, I mean, this parcel stands out already as being every other parcel in there, not directly on the corridor, has quite a large amount of trees. And this is like completely devoid. Now, Commissioner Casino says the unit directly southwest of there is an apartment complex. That's pretty devoid, but those two stand out as unusual compared to all of the rest of the surrounding area. Also, if you look at slide 5, the close-up photograph, I mean, I don't know where the grading and fill has been done, but there's some weird looking stuff there on the right-hand side of that lot. Whether that's water that's got a bunch of old cement stuff on it that leaked all over the place, or
It looks like filled wetland to me.
yeah, I'm not sure what's there, but the large
Filled
cutting
wetland.
of trees, whatever leftover residue. To Commissioner Bartlett's questions about ecological function that this lot served and what has been done to that, I think that's very seriously in question. And I don't think we want to reward, I mean, this is the classic conversation we've been hearing from people over and over about governmental takings. This is a governmental giving. If we are to increase the zoning density on this lot by this amount, this is a significant increase in that property value relative to everything else that lines up along there. And while I'm a huge proponent of this being a transportation corridor with high access to services, where we want to build density and avoid urban sprawl, I support all of that strongly and think there's a lot of opportunity for high density housing along this corridor. It's not in fitting with what we have. So unless we're planning on changing a lot of this, which I might be in support of, I don't see just changing one piece of this as making sense.
I'm sure Christina had it.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, while I appreciate Commissioner Pessinger's thoughts on that, I do think that when you have medium density directly to the south with that row of duplexes, you have a mobile home park directly to the east, commercial all across the north, a apartment complex to the southwest, I think that this really is the area where density needs to be and is appropriate and is surrounded by it. And if we wanted to see trees on our lot again, the best way to do it is to zone it where there would be new building and development standards that when you redevelop this, that they're gonna put in trees and shrubbery. And I mean, development standards have a lot of those kind of issues to them. And so if we want this to just be an empty trailer lot in perpetuity, we do nothing. But if we'd like to see this get redeveloped, fit the neighborhood better, in my opinion, and help solve some of the problems we have with housing shortages, this one seems like a no-brainer to me.
And I will also say that if we're thinking about from an ecological standpoint, I run in circles where we talk about net ecological gain all the time. And the only way to do that legally is either that the government pays for it, or it's redevelopment. Those are the ways to, even, it looks like they took in 1, 2, I see 7 slash piles. That has an impact, but the development requirements would essentially require that site function like it's forested from a stormwater management perspective, if it was redeveloped. But if it's not redeveloped, nothing happens.
Yeah, I would just say that I do agree strongly with both of your perspectives here. I think that for the community, I think that this is an area that needs to be dense housing. For the landowner, I would be very interested in exploring in the future ways that we can ensure that they are held accountable for the damage that they've done to the degree of that we within our limited zoning power have. But when we're talking about approving this, I would be very interested in exploring ways that we can ensure that it does return that ecological function. And I think that should be a key aspect of how we pursue those discussions when we have them, which is why I want to start having them as soon as possible.
And I'm not sure if this is entirely accurate, but I think it's probably worth our worth us being deliberate about differentiating between code violations for current use and land use and zoning considerations. I think it could be pretty easy to conflate the two, but I'm not sure that it's appropriate for us to put those both on the table
I
for
guess
discussion.
my concern here is that a lot of the, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
A lot of what we're doing is going to be creating big changes in the ways, in the profitability of the landscape. And those economic incentives are gonna have a lot to say about how this area is getting developed. And that is very much the center of our purview. And I wanna make sure that we are doing this in a way that does not incentivize bad faith behavior.
That makes sense. Commissioner Casino.
Just on to reiterate and kind of go back to what Commissioner Day was saying about how the zoning issues and possible violations are really not the concern. Or the cutting tree violation is not really the concern of a rezone issue. And I understand the point of we don't want to incentivize it. We don't actually know if the removal of those trees was a real violation or not. If he did have something from the hearings examiner said that he could use that land to do its current use, taking a tree down might not actually be a violation of any kind. And I don't know if they ever litigated that. And it sounds like they didn't litigate that because they went into a compliance agreement about getting a rezone to this higher density. So to me, those issues really are not only are they tangential, they're not really telling us anything because we don't know how they would have finished out anyways. And, there's a lot of other stuff right through there. Where those new apartments just went into the southeast or to the southwest there, I don't know if that was a mini forest before they put in apartments. I know that the Winco and the carpet warehouse across the street and all that stuff, that was developed just here and, since these zoning laws went into place. So I don't know if any of that was wrong either. So I don't want to make the automatic assumption that just because they took off some trees on the south end of this lot, that was necessarily a violation of some sort. We don't know that.
And even if it was a violation, it might have been didn't get a permit for something that they could possibly.
Yeah.
I mean, it is not developed to like the highest and best use.
There's no
on
doubt.
that southern
Yeah.
portion. I mean, you wouldn't be able to retain a lot of vegetation if you were to do a low density residential development.
Exactly.
Standards. And I do want to point out that the units per acre that are cited there, for low density, it would most likely be increased with all the middle housing regulations that are coming in. That's true. Yeah. So on each one of those low density residential lots, you're also going to be allowed to have probably up to 2 ADUs and, minimum of duplex and triplex. So I just want to be clear that that's going to be a changing number.
Right. Well, I think that some of the current concerns that we should have are highest and best use. And I have no idea what the developer plans or if the landowner is ultimately going to be the developer. But this seems like the perfect property that you would see, 5/1. You'd see a bunch of apartments over some retail down below. It almost seems like a waste to use this land for selling trailers. Frankly, it should be something a little bit better than that. And if there's somehow we can add 150 or 160 housing units right on Martin Way.
In the county and get credit for the additional residential.
Goes a long ways towards our 5%.
And
You don't get to take credit for them under the state guidance. He's gonna take credit. I know. Grand Mount, root for Grand Mount. First we need transit and then.
Commissioner Pastinger, go ahead.
So I believe in our next work session, there's talk about one of the goals is to have policies to encourage low-income housing. Looking at page 606 on this document, in fact. So then my question is related to this request for rezone. Do we, because I agree, I think this is a perfect location for high density housing. And my question would be, is there anything we could add with this that is a policy related to encouraging, whether it's a tax break for low income housing to be a proportion of the housing that could be built here, or anything along those lines that should be together with this rezone and amendment?
We'd have to check in with our legal counsel just to understand what the mechanism for that would be.
I'd appreciate that. I think that that would be a really useful balance of our concerns and our interests in this space.
Question.
I don't think you could do it on, aimed at a specific parcel, but if we took the whole corridor,
There's no reason to.
that whole zoning title and gave them a density bonus for offering low income would be something, but that couldn't be tied directly to this proposal.
That is under consideration or in the draft of the codes for the Lacey UGA is to have density bonuses and maybe even trying to find some ways to do tax incentives for low income housing.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, we're working on it.
And if it was annexed, they already have those programs in the city of Lacey.
That'd be even better.
So maybe it's just more of an encouraging a future annexation.
Yeah, I was just gonna suggest that if we don't have any more questions. All right, we ready?
Yeah.
All right, we have a motion moved and seconded to set a public hearing for September 18th, 2024 on comprehensive plan docket item CPA 23, Martin Way land use amendment and rezone. Is there any discussion?
And to send out early notification.
Yes, and to send out early notification. Any discussion before we move to a vote?
I'm a little hesitant to do it on the 18th because staff has already said how much we have on our plate. And this group can tend to make things take a long time. Sometimes it goes, and we don't have any idea what kind of public input we're gonna have. If 20 people show up here to testify, which I doubt will happen, but if it happens, our night's blown. So I would rather wait till night that we don't have a lot of stuff scheduled because I, along with a couple other people, am not excited about running meetings to 9:30. Which we did at our last meeting.
I don't know, what do we have on you?
Oh, yeah, so that's what we were just looking at, like when you said full,
Yeah.
like it's full plus. Why don't you share what is on the ATs? Oh,
It's proposed changes from Maya, so of course, everything we do, we're like, maybe. Climate coming back, introducing the transportation element, having a public hearing for CIP, all on the 18th right now.
and I know you guys don't care at all about the climate and transportation topics.
So, let's spend no time on that.
Shift to the second for transportation, because
Second. If you,
no, I'm
yeah,
sorry, the fourth.
well, we're saying, housing.
No, it won't be done.
Commissioner Passenger.
Sorry.
Chair, I also prefer the first meeting in October date as to give more time for public comment.
I will also be here on that day, not on the other one.
Okay.
So, okay,
I will take a second, I guess, friendly re-amendment.
now that the motion belongs to the body, do we have to, or is it?
You have to vote on the motion.
No,
I mean, vote on the motion as it
you
is.
can move to amend it again.
Yeah,
Or we could just, because it was already moved, we could vote on the amendment to change to the 18th. And then we have to vote on the motion again, so it's either
right,
whichever date we pick.
okay. So, let's take a vote on the amendment from the original motion. This is moving from September 18th to October 2nd. Okay, all in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
That
Okay.
wasn't the motion.
No.
No,
The
that's,
motion was the second. The amendment was the 18th.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're right now voting to have the meeting, have the public hearing on the 18th.
Right.
we're voting to re-amend the motion to put it back on this. No, okay.
Vote on the amendment of the 18th.
Right.
If that passes,
Hmm.
then we know. If it failed, then we vote on the original motion of October 2nd.
I see what you're doing. So we're gonna vote down the amendment to the 18th
Well, maybe. I hope so.
in order to.
I'm gonna do.
Okay,
That's the challenge before us.
okay, so we are now, according to our dual parliamentarians, voting on the amendment to move it from October 2nd to the 18th. September 18th. Okay, all in favor of that amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Hey,
Okay. I'm also opposed. So is that enough to move it back?
The motion fails.
The motion fails. Okay. Thank you.
The amendment fails.
amendment fails. So now the original motion is,
The amendment failed.
The amendment,
Two people voted for the amendment.
Did 6 people?
You don't need, it fails if it doesn't have enough.
okay, so
6 to pass.
that is putting our, so original motion, which is to set a public hearing for October 2nd, for the docket item and to notice early still stands.
Yes. Yeah, no one touched that part.
Okay. All right, that has been moved and seconded. Any discussion before we move to vote? Okay. All right, with that, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, there we go. Oh, did it.
Thank you, commissioners, for your time again and your attention on this.
Thank
It's
you.
always entertaining.
It's dinner and a show.
Right. All right, with that, we're gonna move us along to work session 19, Thurston 2045 housing draft.
Let's go there.
You can do it.
Oh, that's on. Bob, can you hear us?
Yes.
We're gonna turn it right over to you to keep things moving. Thank you for waiting.
Thank you.
Bob, you might be a new face though. You might want to introduce yourself.
Sure. Bob Bankford, I'm a partner at Makers Architecture and helping the team out here on particularly some of the land use and housing components and zoning code. I've been working on regulatory housing and land use regulatory issues for over 25 years at the firm. Done a lot of work for the city of Olympia. First effort working with the county, but happy to be here and happy to help.
Great to see you again. So we have a bunch of slides to go over to discuss the policy issues and I'm assistant principal and work for something and then project manager for the team. So let's see, should we share screen and then go over the slides? Does that sound okay?
Keep the names of these folks.
Bob Bankford and
Bob what?
Bankford, Bengford with Makers.
Or the Vanessa, it might be easier to read. That's
What was that?
FERDOUSE. OUSE. ONEZA.
Burke?
Makers and
Okay.
sorry, you can continue. And feel free to start sharing your slides.
So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna share my screen. Let's see if you can see my screen. You see my screen?
Yes.
Yep.
Oh. Okay, yeah, so yeah, thank you. I am going to just an overview of the presentation tonight. We will go over the updates we recommend on your existing goals and policies, and then we would seek direction from you on some of the new policies. So Bob and I, we're gonna split this presentation into some of the existing policies that I will be presenting, and then Bob will also present some of the new directions. And in our policy review, there are a few broader approaches that I want to bring up.
We can't hear.
Aneza, you're going in and out. It sounds a little garbled.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, that's much better.
Okay, so let me start out. All right. Is this still bad?
There's a little bit of echo, but maybe it'll go away. Maybe.
So make sure I fix that. So I'll try to mute myself when I'm not talking. Hold on. Can you hear me okay now?
It's not great.
Ashley.
Certain times you come out entirely, Aneza. Sometimes you can hear you good.
Since
Sounds like.
Bob, can you and I tag team and maybe present some of these?
Sure, I think most of the slides are mine.
Sorry, Anita.
So it's just the intro.
Yeah,
if I'm talking now, are you able to hear?
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so let me try for the first few slides.
Okay.
All right. So what we are, our policies are, we wanted to look at the consistency with the Growth Management Act. And as part of that, update and added policies to undo and address racial disparity impact on housing, and then potential clarity and streamlining and implementation options. So those are some of the key overall approaches that we have. In our past presentation on housing, we presented the overall process of addressing the racially disparate impacts. As you can see, as part of steps 1, 2, and 3, and we're at 4 and 5 steps. And 1, 2, and 3, county has been doing an extensive public engagement to gather input. We also presented data, analysis, and housing needs and facts that we have included on your map. It indicates the suburban fast garden housing units, and then like costs have increased, and then racially disparate.
Sorry, you're back in and out.
Can't hear. Yeah, I think we should just move
Yeah,
on. with what we-
I think-
here.
I think Bob and I can hopefully take some of these, and then if there are questions, maybe it'll be,
Okay,
sorry.
sorry about that. I apologize.
Yeah, Bob, do you wanna take a stab and I can fill in?
I could, let's see.
Change the slides, Bob.
You could change the slides. Yeah, let's
Yeah.
maybe go on to the next slide. Are we ready to go on the next slide?
We're in step 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's updates to the policies. Oh. So Burke is leading the entire effort on the consultant side. So updating the policies language for consistency with GMA, and I'll be talking about some of the rural issues, and well, actually both some of the rural and urban issues of housing types. They're also dealing with adding some of the required income brackets to the policies from low, very low, and extremely low income households. We're trying to clarify and streamline the policies. Like in any plan, we're just trying to make them more approachable and user-friendly. And as it says, include considerations for the rental market in policies, and then also using inclusive language, things like community members instead of citizens. Providing a diverse housing stock naturally to fit the diverse needs of the county, range in cost, size, and design, and suitability for various household sizes and characteristics. Again, looking at rental housing options in rural areas. I'll talk a little bit about that. And Ani's already talked a little bit about the racially disparate impact study, addressing some of the requirements by House Bill 1220 there to prevent discrimination issues. Next slide. Okay, now this gets to the stuff that I am primarily talking about. So many of you might know your code currently accommodates attached ADUs, but they functionally prohibit detached ADUs since they require double the minimum lot size. And the reason for that is due to some of the concerns county had about consistency with GMA and GMA's policy of limiting rural density. But there's been recent guidance on ADUs coming from Commerce, and they've expressed some openness, but really the county needs to do their homework if we're gonna allow and accommodate especially detached accessory dwelling units. So in terms of demonstrating the need for them, but also addressing and preserving rural character. So, and we looked at numerous counties, and a number of them do have detached accessory dwelling unit provisions. So thus, we're looking at some policy options, and I wanted to provide a few different alternatives for you to consider. The first one on page 4 of your memo.
Sorry, I want to interrupt.
Yeah, sorry, Bob, we've got a question in the border.
So I'm sorry, but this is really important to me. Before we get into all these options about ADUs and landward density and conservation subdivisions and multifamily housing, I want to go back to this first very important topic about two things: racially disparate impacts and affordable housing. And I'm looking less at your slides, but more at this memorandum, and we seem to be on pages 2 and 3. Seems to be perfectly following your presentation. But on page 3 of this memorandum, you have a list that says, while this policy review includes an RDI evaluation, it also includes review of the policies for compliance with other new GMA housing element requirements, and review includes the following approach. And then it lists 7 bullet points. I have questions about all of those. Can we go through those now?
Sure.
So,
Still
what?
I'm here to answer as well, if you can hear me.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just preface that this is an area where Oneza might have the most background, and so if not able to provide answers tonight, we'll be able to answer them, in email format.
Perfect. So these seem to sort of be jumbled together between these two issues of RDI and correcting for those and the topic of low-income housing. The fourth bullet talks about enhanced language in the policy on maintenance and weatherization of older housing through training programs. I don't understand what that has to do with any of this. Is that something in the GMA, housing element requirement?
It's not entirely on GMA, but that's also part of the public input that we received about maintenance programs, and you already have some draft policy, existing policy languages that we enhanced that language.
So then again, it goes back and forth. You got the next one after that, new goal, objective, and policies for consideration on anti-displacement. That often has to do with gentrification. And then it says new policy for consideration on rental housing units. What is that about? Is that like rent control? Is that some other stuff, rules and policies for rental housing? What is that about?
So you already have a goal on providing rental housing, but when we went through the policies, we found that you needed a policy to be added. So this is just a new policy.
That we already have a goal on rental housing?
Correct. You have a goal that includes rental housing. We just added a new policy underneath that goal.
What is our goal? Housing, I'm aware.
That's goal one. That's goal one on your attachment. And then if you look at page one, it's the fourth row.
And that's page,
Page
attached.
one, attachment one, yes.
Attachment.
Okay.
So it's the red language in the right-hand column. And the goal
It
already.
says allow rental housing in the rural unincorporated county that is available to county residents.
Okay, I still don't understand that and why it's referenced here in this bullet. But the things I care about strongly are the RDI and the affordable housing, low-income housing. The RDI, the biggest question I have here, because we all know that there's a history in Thurston County of redlining and literally language property documents saying cannot be transferred to people of color. We know that the county auditor's office has implemented a policy allowing property owners to update those documents to remove that language. We don't have any data or report in here of how that's going, how many exist, how many have been requested to be changed. What is the current status on that? One of the things we hear from the community regularly is that, well, that's nice that that's not enforceable and in the language anymore, but still the practice of the banks or lending institutions that provide mortgages is still to not allow for loans to be made in certain areas to certain classes of people. I don't see anything in here so far and would like to see things in here related to potential notifications. For example, I think any lending or institution that provides mortgages in the county ought to be required to provide a notification of what people's rights are in purchasing properties and what their references and ramifications are and where they should address concerns if they feel like they're not being allowed to purchase a property in a specific area. I would also, this all seems to be looking at what laws have existed that we should simply remove from our books. What regulations have been in place that are wrong and we should get rid of. It doesn't seem to show anything about correcting those problems and what those problems have historically created, those racially disparate impacts. I would think there should be something in here in public communication because it's mentioned several times that there have been attendance and engagement with the public and with the community about these issues. Have we been asking anyone in the public, are they currently experiencing anything? Have they tried to buy property in any specific area and were not allowed? Do they have a desire to live in an area and think it's inaccessible to them?
I know Miriam has specifically referenced having conversations with people regarding accessibility. I don't know if we have asked those specific questions because we don't want to shut people down from their lived experience or their story. But I know that Miriam and other folks on our team have definitely had the accessibility. A lot of times it's cost is what we've heard, above all else. In terms of stats, deed restrictions and CCNRs, that is going to be very, very difficult data to pull and extract, especially on old flats and whatnot, outside the scope of what Burke could do. But in terms of being able to ask the county auditor how their initiative is going.
Yeah, I would
That's an
recommend that at
easier
the
one.
least, to just ask the county auditor what they have as current statistics on
And
this.
that's something that we could do on our team. And then sorry, just one more thing. Really trying to keep the policies high level because we want to leave room for the ideas that we're hearing as part of this periodic update in terms of implementation, as well as future ideas. And so more specific things about partnerships that the county should look to strengthen and, take as it relates to corrective action. It sounds like something that should be in the implementation plan, which is something we've never had before with our comp plan. So if you don't see it like in that level specificity reflected in a policy, it might be because it's something that should be fleshed out more in that implementation plan or action plan.
Did you say we've never had an implementation plan?
Nope, we're very excited because right now, so what happens when you don't have that is that you get very fuzzy policies where you have a policy that's very broad and then you have a such as, for example, and then like a list. We want to take those lists, those such as's, for example, and put them in an implementation plan and identify who will be taking the lead. What is the time frame that we should be looking into this? How much does it cost? Is this something that county, should be following up on or somebody else? So it might feel like we're stripping the policies right now, but it's really to bolster some of those action items and make them clear and hold the county and our community accountable, which is hard to do when it's just the way it's currently written.
Yeah, I think that in the interest of that, and I do agree with the idea of making it very clear that these are not abstract ideas, but actual things that we intend on implementing. It would be nice to have if we are moving that stuff into an implementation plan, to be very clear that it still exists and it's just being moved there. Because it does, I agree, feel a lot like just stripping regulation in a context where if we're trying to provide any kind of economic or racial justice in this context, it's going to require a lot more stick than carrot.
I'll finish my comments and get off my soapbox. I feel like the affordable housing is also, I'm glad to hear there's a lot of support across the commission for, implementing policies that would encourage development of low-income housing connected to all forms of housing. But I feel like, if you look at this background statement, this opening statement right here on the memorandum, this just one paragraph, I think we focused very hard on the part that says requires jurisdictions to plan for and accommodate housing affordable to all income levels. And we've been told there's nothing you can do to encourage low-income housing. There's not very much you can do. You just need to make sure zoning's available for that density. And that's not going to be enough. That's not even going to come close to being enough. And then we focus on review policies and regulations that result in racially disparate impacts. and address them. But then we've missed the last part, most important, develop regulations in support of affordable housing and undoing REIs. And undoing doesn't mean undoing the stupid law. It means undoing the impact. And I feel like we've had a huge amount of impact that we're not even remotely quantifying or looking to ask questions about or looking to address. And I think we ought to outline what our underlying goals here are related to that. I mean, does this mean we would look at neighborhoods where there's, a very low population of racial diversity and say, what are we going to do to encourage people to be able to, of all races, to be able to move into that area? If you look historically at the redlining, it basically is Olympia. I mean, let's be honest, it's the city of Olympia was not available to people of color historically. It's why the North Thurston Public School District is the most racially diverse school district in the entire state of Washington, literally just outside the boundaries of the Olympia city limits. So here we are at the county. We don't have any say over the cities. We don't get to tell the cities, you need to implement this, this, and this. But countywide, what are we going to do to address those racially disparate impacts without having any ability to influence or tell the cities what to do? And so I think we ought to document what our goals are, that we have this amount of a problem. We have gotten public feedback that people are maybe, not de facto in terms of there's not allowed to be laws that limit lending to people of color, but de jure, there very clearly are institutions that are not making that accessible and available. What can we do about that?
Do you have an example of that?
Yeah, I don't know of any, but.
Of a financial institution that would actually have a race test on lending?
The effective race test would be that if you are coming from a racialized background or a low income background, you're overwhelming your credit score or your ability to pay debts on time is going to be reflected in rent. And in other means that are all of that stuff that is very carefully carved out of what can count towards your credit score, what can count towards getting a loan, what can count towards even like your ability to access housing. All of the things they carved out were the things that were generally only available to colonized folks. And that's the big one that I personally experienced, that I know other people in my community have experienced.
I've just heard thousands of examples, and I just shared this book, Capital City, with Commissioner Casino, which lists a lengthy number of examples in the city of New York and in the city of Chicago and several other cities. But I also have heard a lot of stories about what exists right here in Thurston County and Lacey. That's it. Thanks.
I just really quick to jump on top of that with the public comments that we have received here. I just did a quick tally. There are about 44 public comments that we received in this package about housing. Of those, 21 of them were concerned about specifically limiting the degree to which we are using ADUs and DADUs and other tools to increase density in rural areas, which is directly in alignment with the agreement that we requested last time of keeping things under 5% for growth for rural areas. Almost all of those comments and an additional 9 comments were specifically about housing affordability and making housing affordable within areas that people can actually reasonably access it, within transportation corridors specifically. So I want to make sure that when we're talking about these kinds of disparities, that we are specifically looking at areas that are meaningfully accessible to people and that fit with the values that people have overwhelmingly expressed. There were 5 opposed to that out of 44 things, and they were just mostly focused on a different issue.
All right. Ready to move on? All right.
Okay, I'll finish this. So there were, as I mentioned, there were 3 different policy proposals, mostly on the same thing, but the first one being more general and high level, you know, as Ashley was saying, but the other ones get a little more specific. So the second one, for instance, well, the first one, I'll just say it. It says permit accessory dwelling units in rural residential zones to provide additional housing choices for all economic levels, multi-generational and smaller households. The second option adds just a little more detail and says, adds at the end, provided size limitations and design provisions are included to maintain rural character. So it's sort of getting into that doing your homework exercise. And the last one says permit both attached and detached ADUs. So it's sort of a matter of preferences. How detailed do you think the policy should get? And do you agree with the direction here? You know, sometimes it's desired to have a little more detail in to make sure that the code actually goes there. So that's the reason set forth some of these options.
And it's timely because Bob's team working with us are going to be developing code updates. That is part of our comprehensive plan periodic review, is that we don't just do policy, we do code. We don't want them working on a bunch of code updates that the planning commission hasn't given us a thumbs up. You know, we've heard that you want us to explore detached ADUs, but now is really the time to like say, thumbs up, yes, we want to do that, because it's going to result in code updates in Title 20 and multiple zones.
Yeah, I provided some information to all the planning commissions through Tasha a couple weeks ago about one of the housing developments in Yelm that had both ADUs and DADUs. And I mean, my wife and I actually, we went through them and looked at them, and they're really nice. They're small, they're efficient, both from a point of energy, and they don't have any yard other than turf. That's what they're putting in is turf, so, and a lot of plants and trees. So there's no mowing necessarily and stuff like that. So it's very economical, efficient, water-wise, et cetera. I found them very interesting, and a small lot, the number of homes that they put in there with both ADUs and DADUs.
And these are really overwhelmingly probably going to be on 5-acre parcels. So where there is capacity, it's really our rural resource residential, 1 house per 5 acres.
Right.
As Bob noted, we already allow attached accessory dwelling units. In addition to the people that you've heard from as part of, you know, this comp plan process, we've heard from a number of people that it'd be really nice to have detached. Detached allows more options for rental versus attached, as well as just more flexibility, no matter who you're providing that additional housing unit for. And so in terms of, you know, footprint, it might end up being the same. And then also water and sewer, or water and septic, attached would require the same as a detached.
When I went out with Miriam on those, the one in Yelm and the one in Rainier, the biggest comments that I had was their kids or their parents were living in a fifth wheel or a trailer next to their home because they couldn't make a detached dwelling unit because of county code. And that was one of the biggest comments that I saw during that. And these were all people on parcels of 1 acre or larger. Well, I think it's something that we need to put in our policy.
Commissioner Bartlett and then Commissioner Casino.
Casino and Passenger.
Oh, Casino also, and then Passenger.
Okay. Yeah, I guess a little bit of clarification there. I know that a lot of our conversation around ADUs was acknowledging, again, the reality that a lot of these just already exist and a need to codify and make sure that we are increasing the standards for people who are already living in these circumstances. I do want to differentiate in our conversation the ability to create standards for that and a widespread ability to just create small landlords. In terms of general encouragement for filling the rural areas with ADUs. I think those are two kind of distinct goals that are getting a little bit lumped up in the conversation.
So I know that not all the planning commissioners that are here were here when we did the ADU update. Did we do that in 2020? Was that when we did ADUs here?
Yeah.
And maybe this is because it was a while ago, but we just heard from Bob that their detached ADUs are functionally unfeasible. But when we did those codes, we wanted to have detached ADUs as part of it, the way I remember it. So and I think he said that it's size limitations. Well,
Density.
Density.
So they have to
Density.
comply with the underlying density, which means you can't put a detached ADU on a 5-acre parcel.
gotta be 10 acres or bigger.
Our resounding
Mhm.
parcel size is 5
I
acres.
thought that we addressed that during that time and were able to get past that
There is a provision for conversions,
for conversions.
but that is the only.
So
I thought our big hurdle was actually the septic in, not the size limitation in.
From a zoning perspective, it was those pieces, but septic and well, and that was its own beast in itself.
and those are provisions that wouldn't change. So you
Yeah.
would still have to comply with septic, but 5 acres should be big enough to accommodate.
A detached ADU.
Oh, yeah, I
I'm
mean,
a little
it's
bit-
big enough for an attached, so. And any of the new attached units are going through environmental health for review. But it's the density, it's the underlying density.
If there was a breezeway that was connecting them, did that make it so we could do it or?
Oh, you're
Great.
talking, we're talking in the county, not on sewer.
Well,
This is not on sewer.
I'm a little bit, I think
There-
it's ridiculous that we're not able to do it because our intent was to be able to do
Hmm.
it.
So it really comes down to there are very few tools in the rural area to provide different housing types, housing at different sizes. I mean, this is one of them. So I think it's just really gauging the planning commission's thumbs
So
up.
what's the policy proposal to then be able to do ADUs then?
There's some examples on page 4 of the memo, that kind of outline the way that Bob said, size limitations, rural character and detached. They go into slightly more specifics, like.
Was it a yes on the breezeway? That make it attached?
Gray. Gray, right?
Depends on what your definition of building is. I guess if it's physically attached, it's attached, but I don't know 100% for sure how
I've heard of
your code
bottomless
deals with
culvert.
that.
What about roofless breezeways? So you just have a paved sidewalk and now it's a roofless breezeway.
Connection, if you have the same service connection, you're attached.
I think it would be nice
Well-
if we didn't have to require our property owners to do mental gymnastics to figure out if they can
Yeah.
have it. You
I
or
agree.
not.
That's my point.
Getting into kosher law here in my experience.
It's
Well, I was just gonna say, I mean, side conversation that Commissioner Petzinger and I were just having was, he was asking questions, what do they do about their sewer systems if they're on a fifth wheel or a trailer or one of these mobile homes adjacent to a property owner home? They dump into the septic system of the main house. And that's a problem for the county when you talk about the number of people or the number of bathrooms or sinks or facilities that can dump into a septic. With a 3-bedroom house, then you add a 2-bedroom mobile onto it, or like that's where the septic system problem comes in. That's where the county gets involved with the water and, the well and the septic piece of it. But that's what people are doing in the county right now. A lot of people in the county right now. And I know of a lot of places that are doing that.
Fair.
Yeah.
I just want to quickly state a question and state something. The question is, I want to make sure on this attached ADUs proposal, You would even, I don't know, if it's talking about size limitations, but is there a number limitation? Is it absolutely certain it would only be one? It wouldn't be two or three? Okay. And then the second thing is just to share that Commissioner Fishburne privately sent me a message. He's sick and can't be here today, but wished he could be. He has a lot of concerns about this and the Lambert idea and the conservation stuff. So he lives in Rainier and has seen what's happened with the housing stock in Rainier and has concerns. So,
Is he going to be able to share those concerns maybe in an email?
yeah, I think in the future meetings.
Or you could send it to Tasha.
Yeah.
Should add those to the record for us and share them with work.
And-
Rainier was one of the biggest areas of problems.
Yeah.
Rainier doesn't have wastewater.
Actually, it's not Autumn, just outside the city of Rainier.
He says everything in Rainier is on septic.
It is.
It is.
It is.
I wish we were.
But a lot of the conversations I had with people were just outside the city limits.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we can make a decision about exactly which policy language we move forward with later, but is this something that we should be having the makers/Berg team work on development code for?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Straw poll.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, I just want to make sure because they got a lot to do. If there was something that
Is it possible, this is just a random idea, is it possible to change the definition of a dwelling unit to have it like a detached ADU be functionally part of the, like, not contributing to an extra unit in the underlying zoning? Change the definition of your dwelling units. Anyway,
So,
interesting.
so you're suggesting that it would be a single family home and some of that family is living in the ADU?
yeah, because you could, I mean, if, as long as the, like, you can get enough septic capacity, you could put a 15-bedroom house on these.
I think
5-acre parcels.
Yeah,
I think that
it's
gets
silly.
yeah.
Anyway, feel free to move on.
Bob, I'm gonna let you research that one.
Okay, yeah, well, that is an issue. Sure. Let's move on because we got a few more slides here.
Just one last thing about that, and I think it is part of the focus that we've sort of all been dancing around. It was something that was brought up in comments, which is that we're talking a lot about footprint when we're talking about this stuff, when we're talking about these extra buildings, when we're talking about whether we're talking about a 15-person house or we're talking about 5 one-person houses, like 5 3-person houses. Like we're just talking about like. I think we need to have the focus on what the environmental impact of the building is, the building construction is within the landscape and what the, like that seems to be overall where a lot of our concerns are meeting. So it's less about like whether it is detached or not, whether like how many people are physically living in there, but what the overall impact on the sewage system is and what the overall impact on the land is. And those are quantifiable and I think should be our primary concern when we're talking about ADUs, whether we're talking about attached housing.
That's useful if we're moving towards code pretty soon, because one of the ideas or one of the codes, or at least one of the policies that I'd seen was maybe requiring a detached ADU to be within a certain distance of the primary home and not too far. So the footprint is smaller and it's clustered and retains that rural character, and not that it's spread out on the 5 acres in increasing the impacts. Does it sound
Yeah, thank you.
about right? Okay.
Share a driveway terminus. Anyway. Thanks.
Okay.
Sway.
All right, let's talk about Lammerts. Next slide, Onisa. Okay, so per SB 5275, this 3 other policies looking at allowing a little bit more development options in Lammerts, provided there's sufficient public facility and service capacity, as it says here. And so there's 3 policies in your packet on the page 4 of the memo. And the first one deals with encouraging more middle housing types, where right now it's, primarily single family. So looking at middle housing types, whether it's duplexes or triplexes, or even a couple of townhomes attached, or cottage clusters, things like that. Or perhaps even mobile home parks is a little bit more of a stretch, but that's another one that was mentioned in there. The second one is type 1 landlords to consider a demonstration program to incentivize affordable housing. And on that, many cities, I did see King County had a demonstration program. It was really confusing to read, but many cities have adopted demonstration programs that attempt to try these things out, but definitely limit how many you do. So to help measure whether or not they're successful, and if they are, then you can adopt a full code to allow these types of things. So that's what that's after. And then the third one is for type 1 and type 3 landlords to expand the types of commercial uses allowed, to allow just a little more flexibility to provide greater services to those living in rural areas, as it says. So I'll stop there if there are any comments.
Do you all remember what landlords are, especially for those?
That's a good point.
Limited areas of more intensive rural development.
Awesome.
Thank you.
And then where they exist in Thurston County, probably the biggest one is outside of Rochester. A lot of the landlords we have are more legacy lakeside communities or waterfront communities. And there's a few others sprinkled around there, but just as you're thinking about where this would be applied, Boston Harbor is one of them, and then Rochester. And Rochester does not currently have facilities that would support some of these housing types now, but we are exploring some alternative wastewater solutions specifically that could be implemented in Rochester to accommodate this level of housing in the future, knowing that those things go together.
So this would only really be effective in like the Rochester, Boston Harbor, Carolyn Beach, Tamishan areas, because they do have something other than septic systems.
Unless those other areas looked at like the new large
loss.
on-site loss systems, yeah, which I know the state they're providing more funding to implement those. Their policies are getting more flexible, so I think that it is going to become increasingly available. I mean, but there's still costs associated with it.
Are the loss systems going to be put in by the county, or are they going to be put in by the landowners there? I mean, because we can't develop new landlords.
Yeah, and I think that is open for future discussion. I just know with the research that we've been doing with environmental health, that they're interested in piloting some with the state. And there have been some pilot projects specifically in King County that are more looking at law systems as they apply to like retroactively, almost like to a district or whatnot to support affordable housing and more commercial development. We can talk a lot more about that some other time, but for this conversation, just know that we are trying to explore options that would expand the housing types that could be accommodated in our existing landlords. And this is a 20-year plan. So hopefully within 20 years, we'd be able to get some of those on the ground.
And I'm just gonna note for folks, we're a few minutes over already into, well, we're just a few minutes over time. So just noting, but go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify something that that Commissioner Casino said, which is that these sorts of developments cannot be done on existing habitat. It's on already developed areas.
No new landlords can be created.
Yes.
Okay. We want to see a large volume of public comment. Let's just tell Boston Harbor we're middle housing. Fine.
Thank you.
So is this?
Yeah, this is a
An
great
area.
idea if we can actually.
Well, the only other tools.
I particularly am interested in the type of commercial uses allowed being expanded, what that might, I mean, that could mean a couple different things. Like, I think the intention is to invoke like a community grocer or like a neighborhood cafe or something like that. But I want to make sure that we're not being tricked into allowing things that are a little bit less in line with the character of the space. Not by like the designers here, but developers will build what they can. People will make money out however they can. So I want to make sure that we're talking about expanding the type of commercial uses to stuff that actually supplements those communities with the goal of reducing transportation costs and creating accessibility. I would want that goal to be explicit if we're talking about the types of commercial uses allowed.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, but the state was really specific in that.
Yeah, I double checked that today, in fact, and have my own cheat sheet slide here that has some of the material, and they talk about things like 5,000 square foot limitations for such commercial uses in landlords. And so that's really your most common tool, is limiting the square footage of some of these types of uses. And of course, commenting on the types of uses. So I'm kind of curious as well, but it's a policy to kind of, explore and looking at it. But I think let me see what we did say in the exact policy language there. We, well, what we could do is add, again, like we did with the ADUs, say, to expand the types of uses, provided measures are integrated to retain rural character. You could add that clause into really all of these to help check that box, at least in the policy.
And the way this works is, this is sort of the overarching policy, and then the development code, like we actually have zoning districts specific to the landlords. And that's where you would see any updates to the types of uses that would be permitted, and any kind of size restrictions or impervious surface area coverage and whatnot for that. So getting feedback on like, yes, you would, the commission would want to retain rural character, or only limit those to, essential corner grocer, I don't know, whatever that is. That will come before the planning commission, as long as we get the thumbs up that you even want us to entertain commercial uses.
Yeah, I'm tapping what we mean by rural character for another conversation. That's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, straw poll.
Okay, landlords with different housing types and limited commercial. Okay. Great. Next one.
Next one.
We don't have too much.
Okay, conservation subdivision. There's some alternatives on this one. Well, actually, we have two different slides on this issue because there's two different possible policy directions here. So we say new policy that focuses on affordable housing focused conservation subdivisions. And so policy options on your, I guess, page 4 or 5, integrate different levels of detail on the number and locations of clusters, provisions protecting rural character, and also the specific number of units. And we looked, staff had already done some research on San Juan County, and I looked at it too, and they've got some very unique provisions that allow some clusters like the picture here of like cottage kind of developments in rural areas that are much greater density than the 1 per 5, but they limit the number of them, and they have strict provisions on the size and also the design of them. So they address the rural character, but they also demonstrate in that county the incredible need for some affordable housing, because there are some jobs in these rural areas, and a need for some affordable niche projects like this. And usually you're pretty much going to need like an affordable housing provider to be able to meet the technical affordable housing requirements and monitoring stuff. So the policies, if you look on your memo, so there's some there's some different examples that add different level of detail, and one says update your current conservation subdivision regulations to encourage and incentivize affordable housing in a rural residential zone. So it's kind of vague, but it at least gets you going in that direction. If you feel you need a little more detail, again, there's option 1B and 1C. And 1B adds details like long-term affordability, mentions housing clusters, and adds a clause, provided conditions are included to manage the number and location of such clusters, and maintains long-term affordability and helps maintain rural character. Let's see, the last one adds even more detail and says, provided each cluster is limited to 12 dwelling units and a long-term stewardship plan, maintain affordability. That last one is actually a policy, I believe, that San Juan County used. So they felt they needed to add that level of detail. So I thought all of that was interesting, and I reached out and talked to the planners there in the county, and even looked at, or at least got pictures of an aerial of one of their examples. So it was interesting, and it seemed like something that could work, again, because it's strictly limited, but it is affordable. So I'll stop there, see if there's any comments.
So, and this is a density, this takes like the underlying capacity and then adds density bonuses, essentially?
Actually, it's not a density bonus. It has almost a completely different density regulation. It just allows these more intensive clusters to occur in the rural areas. I believe it just says you could do between 3 and 12 of these in a rural area. And then you've got all these other strict affordability standards. And then you've got, it has to be, it can only be in these zones. They have to be, X feet or a mile apart. Provisions like whatever you want to do to, limit it and guide the locations.
And I think my question was a little bit more about like, we're taking the development rights and kind of just concentrating them, or are we?
It's almost ignoring the development rights. It is very unique.
Yeah.
It's just related to you meet all the other requirements and like really relating to stewardship of the natural resource lands, providing affordable housing. Like if you can check all those boxes, and they're not easy to check, so I don't want to make it sound like these are gonna be popping all over the place. But if you can check all those boxes, you are allowed to build a development of this size. And they really are smaller units. I've visited one of them on Lopez. It has a working farm. It has all these alternative energy things associated with them, but it has an affordable housing partner that helped develop that. So I think we are leaning toward a place like San Juan County because they have stuff on the books. They have things on the ground. We've been able to check in with them, understand concerns that they had from a county, the county perspective, and then it won't be as heavy of a lift in terms of trying to design something from scratch.
Okay, we've got Casino Bartlett.
I guess my concern with that, if it's not tied to land that's already owned, it's tied to a particular area, then you have a first mover bonus. The first guy that builds is going to be able to build the cluster, and everybody else within a mile or whatever I don't like that at all. I really like the idea of clusters, and I really like the idea of density bonuses, but I don't like the idea of a first mover bonus.
And I'm not sure if that provision is needed under state law, and we could confirm that, like if they put that in there because there was some concern they had. If it was just that's what their community conversation resulted in, then the community conversation here could result in something different.
Yeah, what they also included was a limit on the total number. So perhaps you could include that limit on the total number, but maybe you don't have it has to be 5,000 feet apart or something. You could maybe omit that. So I think that, you don't have to do what they did. You could come up with something of your own. I think it's, as long as we do our homework, as they say, I think it could fly with the state.
And so I think similar to the other ones, it's really a thumbs up on, do you want us to do that additional homework? Is this a tool that you'd like to further develop as part of the comp plan and housing update?
Let's tour around the horn here.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. go ahead.
Yeah, so this is something that I've been pushing for a little bit in terms of our conversations. I'm really happy we're talking about it. I do have concerns specifically around whether we're talking about creating. The thing that I like about conservation subdivisions is that we're not increasing net development. In fact, we're kind of decreasing net development in terms of overall habitat. But that is entirely contextual, and that lives or dies in how this is implemented. So I want to make sure that when we're talking about these things, we're talking about what the overall viability, the overall ecological viability, or the overall land use viability of that area is, making sure that is outside of the context of this individual property is being maintained. We had some conversations about like what that ratio looks like, and I wouldn't want to go, I would say something like a 75% ratio of acreage for housing. For myself, that's my own preference. It's also something that was mentioned in some of the feedback that we got. And yeah, connectivity, and both in terms of the ecological connectivity is important, and then also the human connectivity. If we're talking about these clustered housings, and especially if we're talking about putting low-income folks in those folks need to be able to have access to transit. They need to have access to resources. That's part of the reason that we want to do this, and that needs to be stated within it, that we are trying to that one of the limits to where these can be put is within resource corridors, within maybe already used areas a little bit, in terms of making sure people have access to food and transportation where they're at.
You're not gonna find that in Thurston County.
Yeah, that's an issue. Mr. Messenger.
I'm confused because we're talking about, and this slide here states new policy that focuses on affordable housing focused conservation subdivisions, as if it's one thing.
But here they're seeming like they're.
There are different types of conservation subdivisions that regulations we might be able to develop.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing is
There's
this
different legal frameworks.
page 5 of 6 on this memorandum, the sentence right above Exhibit 2 says 2 different types of conservation subdivision policies are suggested. One focused on affordable housing and another focused on conservation.
Why?
That's you're losing me there. I understand why you want them together. I don't understand why you want them separate.
Well, I'll talk about that on the next slide. The second one is, it doesn't have the affordable housing provision. That's the difference. It's as simple as that.
You could structure one policy
It's called a
around
resort.
conservation subdivision with different incentives built in, and then have it play out in the code. So incentives for affordable housing, incentives for water resource management, incentives for national like land conservation. So there's a lot of different reasons why you do a conservation subdivision. But there are in the code, it is gonna have to be broken out a little into these different categories to comply with state law.
Yeah, this second one is somewhat closer to your old code for the, what was it, the PRRD code that actually had a density bonus to incentivize the clustering and saving more habitat and open space. That's the approach. And the graphic here is actually one I wrote for, I used to be a planner for Bonner County, Idaho, northern Idaho, and wrote the conservation subdivision ordinance 20 years ago for them. Although they had pretty decent density bonus options, but in talking to staff there now, I've been away for 25 years, and it's only been used once, but that's mostly because they have so many freebie options to split your property and subdivide that nobody has needed to really use that ordinance. But it sounds like your ordinance before was used, but that it was taken away, I don't know, 10 years ago, or I don't know the exact year, but it was taken away due to concerns with GMA and conformance. But many counties now do have such conservation subdivision provisions and allow density bonuses, provided, again, they do their homework, they put some brackets on it. Part of it is limiting how much footprint you have on the property, how much roads you need to build, and also preserving the resources.
So in this case, this is you've taken the development rights from all of these parcels, concentrated them. Is this not what we're talking about?
I'm confused.
It's basically the way that the density is calculated. So the affordable housing one that San Juan County has doesn't really speak to density at all and like a shifting of development rights or anything like that. That's really, it's a distinction that plays out more in the development code. This one that you're seeing here is the more traditional,
Right.
You calculate all your development rights, you decide whether, as a community, we want to provide density bonuses to try to incentivize these things and move forward. Affordable housing could still be part of this. You could still figure out density bonuses if you provide affordable housing, but the mechanism for how we get there is different.
Okay, and then, I think my question is, so in the example on the left, could you, under the affordable housing, you could take any one of those given lots and put 12 units on it?
Yeah, instead of the 8.
Okay, so I do think it is pretty important to distinguish between the two different types of conservation subdivisions and policies. One, I think, gives me a lot more pause than the other. And just another note on conservation subdivisions, in the policy, I would suggest that we actually talk about the county's obligations under the Clean Water Act and the NPDES permits to ensure that low impact development is the preferred and commonly used approach to stormwater management in the jurisdiction. I think this example here, I believe that this is a borderline legal obligation for every jurisdiction that is covered by a municipal stormwater permit. So I think we should talk about that, because not only is it probably an obligation, but the Clean Water Act should preempt the Growth Management Act considerations.
Yes.
So. Soapbox, done.
None of those ones. And I mean, I would say there's regulations, and then we've been trying to explore as many different incentive pieces as possible. So thinking about things like stormwater impact fees, you get reduced mitigation fees, like there are lots of things that go into this. But it's really do you want us to keep exploring? Like the policy can be written pretty broadly, develop and incentivize, whatever that looks like. But the hard work is actually figuring out how to turn it into code. And so knowing whether there's a thumbs up to do that code, but you will all get to see.
Can we get this PowerPoint emailed to us?
It was.
It should have been yesterday.
Yeah, nice phone.
Yeah. We can double check, make sure you got it.
Yeah, and transportation. So when I was at the Lopez Island community, they had a shared tool shed. And it got me thinking about when you do cluster housing in a rural area, the opportunities for shared car, like alternative public transportation, but it's like community transportation where maybe you only need 2 cars for multiple homes to share instead of everyone needing their own car because they're spread out on 5-acre lots. So I'll just throw that out there, that it's not just formal transit that becomes an
Yeah, I think that that's tied directly into the need for the income concerns to be coincident with the conservation concerns. Because I think that you're going to get more of those types of solutions when you're in that kind of situation like Lopez Island, where you have folks who are lower income and have an incentive to bundle resources. Otherwise, I do agree that you're essentially just creating a permanent resort. And I want to make sure that we don't accidentally do something we're not intending to do in that regard. So I'm very interested in these as a conservation tool, but I'm very concerned about their exploitation. And I think that tying it to lower income housing is one of the ways to do that, as is these other resources and the overall footprint, as you were mentioning. Those are the three sort of guiding points that I have for it.
Messenger?
So we made a motion and passed it to focus on the 5% limitation. We're now getting this proposals of should we research this potential policy to expand density, this policy, this concept. I'm just curious, well, we may be in favor of all of these. Where do we think the numbers are gonna come from? Do we, it sure sounded to me previously when we said 5%, like, oh crap, that's gonna be hard. We're gonna be over that. So do we need to encourage this or do we need to discourage this? Get under 5%.
So the affordable housing example that doesn't have density play into the calculation, the underlying density, that would be adding more units on top of like the base assumption of whatever capacity we think we have in a rural area. This other mechanism, these density bonuses that we're talking about that might like incentivize, those are gonna have to come through some kind of development right transfer off of conservation being done elsewhere. And so written into our HCP, we're already gonna be on the hook for conserving thousands of acres. Just in the last year, we have 20 development rights that we have retired. So I don't know if this is gonna become so popular that all of those will be used. But that is the difference in the mechanism. Like we will have to figure this out. But overall, it's still gonna be a net reduction in capacity.
Okay, thank you.
And I think just to that point a little bit, I think if you are looking at like both policies and codes in this area, talking about the linkage to transfer development rights would be appreciated.
Yes.
Because I think that would help people understand in some of these cases, it's not that you're just getting 2 extra development rights, like those come from somewhere else and it's the net impact.
They come from somewhere else. And I think you also have to think about why are there so many concerns about having growth out in rural areas? It's because we don't want all of our working lands to be converted into 5-acre lots. And like, this is a way to actually preserve more of our working lands, more of our habitat and activity, biodiversity, all those things, which is why we'd want to incentivize it instead of just thinking that the market's going to play this one out, because it isn't. And even under the current regulations, I mean, there are examples of, 2 farms that were preserved, one of which has now been purchased by Oli Ecosystems and is going through an immense restoration process along the Deschutes River. That may not have happened without these kinds of provisions. So it was successful in terms of conserving land, or has been successful, and it'd be great to do a refresh of it.
And are you asking for, again, this is a thumbs up straw poll for pursuing?
And if you have a preference on one or the other.
I think it'd be interesting to personally see policies on both. I have some inherent skepticism on any that would increase the development units in rural areas, but I think it's probably worth conversation.
So it could be an adaptation of what San Juan County has, but using our mechanism of transfer. But maybe you get more if it's affordable housing development versus some other type. Okay.
Something like that.
Sorry, externally processing. So,
I think
Bob's gonna do it all. He's gonna magically make it all happen. Are there
All right.
close?
Are we, one more slide, I believe? Here we go. Getting my cheat sheet out here. So the last one, getting into UGAs, so thinking probably Grand Mound. Policy direction on multifamily and shared housing in UGAs. So consider adding a policy that gets into increasing density, updating regulations to promote multifamily housing, manufactured home parks, and shared housing. As many of you know, there's been some shared housing or like a legislation that requires well, more cities and urban areas to allow for basically SRO types of housing forms. So inside of UGAs, and for joint planning areas, that this should occur through the joint planning process. So what I'll add though is like in Grand Mound, your most dense residential zone goes up to 16 units per acre. That is kind of a average townhouse density, and it's kind of a low density garden apartment form. You know, garden apartments can be up to 50 units an acre, for instance. So the graphic there is one we prepared for a community on a site that, you know, shows townhomes and some low-rise apartments and even garden apartments, for instance, and it's definitely over 16 per acre. I had the benefit of going to Great Wolf Lodge within the past 9 months, and that's a huge building. So why can't you have some allowance for something more than 16 units per acre in Grand Mound? So that's what this is about.
Great Wolf Lodge is also a sovereign nation, so that's a little bit of a different issue.
Yeah.
And I think just in terms of scale.
Yeah.
What would be appropriate, and there were recent changes to zoning along that corridor. So there's the residential zones, there's also the commercial zones that allow residential mixed use. And so I think it's kind of looking at that full suite of what's allowed, but this is really our opportunity at the county to try to provide as many different housing types as possible. We've heard from the Chehalis tribe that there's a lack of workforce housing, that a lot of their workers live in Lewis County and commute because there is no available housing in Grand Mound. So
this one feels a little less controversial. Do we want to just move to this?
Yeah. I mean, I'm just gonna say again that I want this to be something that is focused on the overall ecological footprint that we're dealing with. If this is decreasing the ecological footprint, then I'm all for it. If it's net increasing it, then that's a different issue. So that's within the space that it's in and in the larger county sense. If we're removing density from elsewhere, great. If we're just increasing construction, that's different.
I'd say we're talking about the UGA here, so I think it's fundamentally different.
it has water and sewer, so it's where development is intended to go, is where you do have those services.
Yeah, okay. Is that the last one for us?
I think pretty close.
Onisa?
Next one's just
I think it's next steps is your next one. There you go. Ashley, do you want to take this, or Anisa, can you?
We'll be back. We're gonna talk about housing. You know, we thought we would just have the whole chapter. We are taking these in more bite-sized pieces. They're big decisions to make. There's also a lot of work that still needs to be done based on the decisions you made tonight, but this is huge. This really provides the guidance to start working on all the code updates. And just because we didn't touch on every single policy in this document, that doesn't mean that we aren't open to feedback as we move forward into the housing discussions. We know this is coming at you fast, so take some time to read through this, write down what those questions or comments are, because the conversation will continue. Thank you, Bob.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Sorry about the inconvenience.
All right, so we made it through.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you. All right, moving us along now. Do we have anything else in the general Thurston 2045 update? Okay,
Other than schedules are gonna be shifting and know that we're doing it to try to give you and the public more time with all of this content.
okay. And then we already did the staff update. Unless you have anything else?
No.
Okay.
Really?
Nothing's changed in the few hours we've been here. All right, moving on to calendar and agenda items that are tentative and attendance. So we've got August 21st meeting coming up, 2 different work sessions there. How are we doing on attendance? Is that good for most folks? Okay. And then September 4th, September, I am gone the entire month. So I will not be here for the September 4th work session on Thurston 2045, the transportation element. Joel, will you be here? Yep. Okay, cool. How's everybody else looking? Good. Okay. All right, anything else on calendar and agenda items from anybody? Before we move on to good of the order, we have something a little meaty left. Okay, moving on, good of the order, we want to talk about our LRA issue.
Cindy? Commissioner Kaiser?
Folks have had a chance to look at that, tried to be fairly clinical about what we were aiming for, and give it a little context. And I appreciate Barry's contribution too on giving us a little more detail about what actually worked.
And would you all like feedback from the?
Well, that's what we were
Yeah.
hoping to look for. If you could give us any feedback on it in the next couple of days.
Can I look at it for one thing?
Just send us a note's fine.
Yeah.
And we'll take a look and consult and then come back to y'all if we think we need to make changes.
I realize that Commissioner Bombarger was pretty satisfied with you guys.
You know, we didn't hear from
didn't hear
him,
from him.
unfortunately.
He has a,
This is his mom, right?
his mom's in town. He also dislocated his shoulder.
Oh, my goodness.
And is finally going to seek treatment for that tomorrow.
Oh,
He's been
gosh.
very out of it for that.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for that update. I appreciate it.
worries.
We were a little worried about him because he hadn't responded.
And it's not like him.
It is not like him.
And Commissioner Fishburne emailed when he said he couldn't make it tonight that he thought it looked great and he really appreciated the work that y'all did.
Thank you.
The one question I had about it for you all is, when we put together, and I appreciate, Tasha and, staff for the input you gave us, the RCWs and the WAC information, we would research some of those and put those in the exhibit. But we put some of it in there all caps, and some red in there. I just wanted to get some feedback on you on that, because I know sometimes all caps means I'm shouting at you, which is not the intent, it's just to highlight the piece of it. And the red was to highlight the pieces that we thought we needed to really point out to the commissioner. That's the reason we put that in there, but we can change that if anybody has any questions about that.
Yeah, when I brief decision makers, I'll usually use bold if I'm trying to do something like that.
I've done that too.
Or highlight in yellow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't our goal to
Yeah.
prolong our meeting. It's
Right.
just to open it up if folks want to send in
Yeah.
comments.
Perfect. Thank you, Barry. Thank you, Sandy. Anything else on that?
Well, I think we'd like to get it to the staff by Friday.
Okay.
So we can get it in the packet for next, the 21st.
Thank you. And we have let the board know that the planning commission is interested in being at the briefing, so hopefully that'll be accommodated, if.
But we'll be there whether they're accommodated or not.
Oh, no, but wanting to hear feedback, we thought we would let them know ahead of time.
Yeah.
So do you want feedback by like tomorrow evening?
Tomorrow evening would be
Tomorrow
great.
evening? Okay, and that'll give you time to get staff by Friday.
And my feedback now, I thought it was excellent. I'm willing to sign off on it.
Yeah, it was really nicely done. Thank you. All right, any other good of the order? Having no other business, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you all.
You too.